easy to forget exactly what an operator does or what a test does. So it's quite useful to have the description panel there to let you know exactly what objects do. Now, the parameter panel, as I said, this is, I'll just expand this so it fills the view. The parameter panel is basically like the control panel inside the main interface of 3D Studio Max, and it's very much a correspondence to that. And some operators will show elements in here and the control panel in Max, and others won't. It just depends on the operator in question. And basically you work with it in the same way as you would with the control panel, sorry. It usually has rollouts, as you can see here. Not always. Some operators don't necessarily have lots of rollouts. Some are quite simple, as you can see. As I click on each one, it brings up the rollouts for that particular operator. And you just use this as your interface to working with the various parameters that come with each operator, and also for working with events as well, because events can have, well, the global event has its own particular elements that you can work with. So let's have a look at the event view. This is probably the space within the particle view workflow that you will be spending most of your time with, so it's really worth going through it in quite a bit of detail actually. This is the event view. You can see, well, actually let's start from a blank canvas. I'll start from scratch. I'll just minimize this for a second so you can see what we're doing here. I'll delete all the events and the source in here, and you can see that there you are, it's disappeared from the Max viewport as well. So we've given ourselves a blank canvas now from which we can start working with. Just reposition this so we've got a bit more room here, and we'll still be able to see what's going on here in the viewport too. Okay, so the first thing we need is an empty flow. We need a source event, and we need a global event. So I'll do that by using empty flow, and I'll just drag that into the event view, and you can see that it's ready to create a new event wherever I drop it. I'll drop it there, and as you can see in the Max viewport, it's also created a source icon, and it's used the previous settings that we use, so it's set to circle. Now you'll notice that the global event has been called PF source 01, as I described earlier. This is the standard numbering system. Now in that event there's one operator, and it's called the render operator, and this is placed here so that you'll have global control over how the particles that derive from this particular source, everything that comes from it, how they render. So you can see that the render operator has been used here in this source event to give you global control over rendering. This is quite a common thing, as I described earlier. You can make things global, or you can make them specific to events by just putting them in events. So this is a standard feature of particle flow, and it's something that you'll have to come to terms with. You'll get used to it, and it's a very powerful feature. Now let's close particle view, and now we can see we've got this icon here, and you can see that if you look at its name, it's called PF source 01. So it has the same name as the global event in the particle view. So as I said, and you know, this has to be remembered, this is the 3D viewport's corresponding item to the global event within the particle view. So let's just open up particle view again, and we'll just maximize it so we have a little bit more space to work with. Okay, so what we need to do now is to create some particles in our scene. So to do that, I'm going to create a new event, and I'm just going to drag this birth operator here, and I'm just going to drop it into the viewport, and you can see that particle flow is ready to make an event for it to appear in. And I drop that, and you can see it's created two operators and a new event. The event's called event 1. You know, it's using a standard naming system, event 01. Event 2 would be event 02, and so forth. And you can see that within that event it's created two operators. Now you might have expected only one operator, considering I only dragged one out, but generally particle flow will create a display operator for every event that you create. And there's actually an option in the default display options, default display, and you can set that to global. And if you do that again, if we just do that again, you can see now it doesn't actually create a display operator for every new event that you create. If you do this with a standard flow, it will actually create just one display operator which appears in the source event. And as I've just said, that will then have a global effect, and basically all of your particles in your entire system will only display with one display type. That generally isn't that useful, so it's probably better to actually accept that you're going to end up with a display operator in each new event, and just delete it if you don't really need it. So I'll just change that back to local, and now when we create new events, we'll actually get a display operator within them. Now you can see that the display operator, if I click on it, is currently set to display the particles as ticks, and as you saw earlier, ticks are little cross shapes, and the current color is a kind of purpley color, and it's going to display 100% of the particles. So you can also, if we have a look at the birth operator, you can see that the parameters for that are the emission start. It's going to start emitting particles on frame 0, and it's going to stop by frame 30. But during that time, it's going to emit 200 particles. So if I just hide the particle view by pressing 6 and move to frame, say 30, by now we should have had all our particles emitted, but you can actually see there's nothing in the viewport. So that's not very useful, is it? I mean, we've emitted 200 particles and we're displaying them, but we haven't actually got anything in the viewport. So that's obviously, a problem. Why aren't we getting that? Well, the reason for that is that we don't actually have any position for the objects at the moment. So that's something that we need to do next. Okay, so I'm going to open particle view again, and I'll just maximize it again. So in this case, I'm going to use the position of the viewport icon to actually define where the particles appear. So I'm going to use position icon. So if I just drag that, you can see particle flow is ready to create a new event wherever I drop it. But I'm not going to do that this time. I'm actually going to add this to this current event. And you can see that as I drag the operator over the event, particle flow is producing a colored line, and the color changes depending where I am within the event. Now, the blue line means insert. It'll actually insert that operator at that point. And the red line means replace. So, be careful where you actually drop your operators, because you could actually replace an operator that you've already put in, and something which is quite important to you. So, in this case, it doesn't really matter where we place the operator within the event. So I'm just going to drop it here. Generally, I prefer to have my display operators at the end of the event. It just makes it easier for me to find them. So that's a pretty good idea, I think. So I'll just drop that here. Now, as I said, it doesn't really matter where I place this position icon, but with some operators it does actually matter. A particle flow actually does operate from top to bottom, so first the particles will be birthed, then the position will be set, then they'll get displayed. But all of these things will get evaluated before you get to at the end of a frame, so you can actually put a tick operator, a display operator before your position, and you'll still get particles displayed and the position will still be correct. Now, with other operators, this isn't necessarily true. Some operators actually do depend on the order that you place them in, because they'll actually inherit values from the previous operator. So this means that, if you have two speed operators, depending on how they're set up, if you change the order of them, you'll get different results. So you'll learn that as you become more familiar with particle flow. And again, it's very difficult to say, due to the number of operators and tests, exactly what order you should place things in. It's just something that you'll come to become familiar with as time goes on. And to be honest, sometimes you just have to experiment and see, which is the best order to place things in. So let's have a look at the position icon operator and see what it's done. You can see that the parameter for the position of the operator is set to volume. This is it here. The location of the particles is actually set to volume. And in this situation, that's pretty much fine for us. This will mean that the particles will appear randomly within the icon's volume. So let's have a look at that in the viewport, and I'll do that just by pressing 6 again. So now if I scrub to frame 30, you can see that we've got some particles. We haven't. So that's odd. Why haven't we got particles? We birthed the particles and we've given them a position, but we still haven't actually got any particles in the viewport. So what's the problem now? Well, let's just open up the particle view again, and If you look at the global event, you can see that they're not connected. The two items are not